Hi, Geoff, and welcome hotel guests.
Good to see you, Mike.
Well, Geoff, got a busy show today. Later in the strategy suite, KLF hits the road. An independent MLA won't be going anywhere. The World Cup is about to kick off, and SFU's Surrey Medical School gets a big boost. But first, our guest today was sworn in as the 34th Premier of British Columbia 25 years ago this week, on June 5th, 2001 to be precise. Gordon Campbell. Welcome back to Hotel Pacifico.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here. Good to see you, Geoff.
Yeah, good to see you.
25 years ago, you came to office. You led the province for almost a decade. Have you had a chance, because of the 25-year mark, to look back at all? Because you're not really a guy that looks back. You tend to look forward, but I'm curious if you did look back just a little.
Well, I remembered it was 25 years ago, but I haven't spent a lot of time talking about it. I think about it sometimes. I think about the lessons that we could take from it. But actually, the one thing that struck me just getting ready for you guys is how different how similar the world is, but how different it was. We're sort of like a quantum leap from 25 years ago, and it's not surprising. It's 25 years ago. I was introduced the other day, and some guy said, I can't remember who it was, but they said that I was elected mayor 40 years ago. I'm not old enough to have been elected mayor 40 years ago. So it's these numbers are starting to pile up in me. I told my older son the other day that it's not possible for me to have a 50-year-old son, and he's going to have to figure out how to deal with that, right? So I don't look back that much, but there are lots of lessons I think that you could learn that I hope people do learn.
One of the really interesting things to me about it was how turbulent it was during that period when the BC Liberals, which were a very different animal from what current voters would remember as the BC Liberals, had a sudden resurgence. There was a takeover, so the not NDP side of the world moved from social credit to BC Liberal. All this happened in a matter of a couple of years. And then that election that Mike and I will always disagree about who precisely won. But in any case, the NDP period with Clark and Dosanjh.
Geoff, in 1996.
Well, there was an NDP sign on the door as far as I recall. But anyway, kind of an interim period there of transition, and I wonder if you think we're heading into something like that now, where we had one very close election, another one's to come at some point.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I think there are things that stay the same, right? I think there's a solid, kind of irrevocable New Democrat vote that's probably 38 to 40%. It's there, and the question is, if you divide the others, then who knows how it's going to break? That's what happened in '96. It may have felt like it was quick to you, Geoff. It was 8 years for me. It was a long time.
I know it was long for you. You showed real staying power, no question.
Well, at any rate, we got through it, but it is a very similar thing. And it's, I found as we were listening to what's going on recently, the label issue was a big thing. And Michael remember this. And everyone told me to change the name, and we should be called the Upside Down Pancake Makers or something. And it just doesn't work to do that. It's you divide the vote when you do that. So there's one, I think, potential opposition party in BC now, and it was very similar to us. But it took us, it took a lot of work from '96 to 2001 to bring everyone together. That's just what happened. It takes time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, during that period, throughout the 90s, your approach was kind of relentless pursuit of bringing people into a big tent and getting everyone unified, particularly after '96, but before then as well. That approach seems to be a little different today. It's not necessarily a big tent approach. It's maybe more of a populist appeal we're seeing out of the BC Conservatives. Do you see similarities, differences in how these parties are approaching today compared to what you went through?
Well, I one of the things, Mike, I really am getting really tired of is labels. I don't know what it means to be progressive, what it means to be conservative, what it means to be all that sort of. The question for me is, what are you going to do, and how are you going to bring people together to do it? That's what the real question is. So I don't think it's really as different as we'd like to think it is. I think it's pretty similar stuff. And the challenge, I do think this is something that I'm not looking back particularly, but I think right now is, Canada's a huge place. British Columbia is a big place. It's the size of England, France, and Germany combined. And it's not, you can't build a British Columbia party from the Lower Mainland, just like you can't build a British Columbia from Vancouver Island. You have to sort of somehow find a way that you bring commonality to people all over the province, from the north to the Kootenays to the Caribou to the Chilcotin to Vancouver Island to the Lower Mainland to the suburbs, et cetera, right? So it's a big task. And I think one of the problems that we face today, and that I think sometimes people forget, is we actually think of the world like it was a long time ago. The world has changed dramatically now. And so, 25 years ago, we did lots of stuff and it was good, or 30 years ago, we did lots of stuff that I think it turned out to work. But I think you can take some of the lessons, but not as many as we might want. And I think you have to find how you bring people together, frankly, with different language and a whole bunch of things right now.
But there's some core issues about leadership that perhaps you could pass on to Carrie Lynn Findlay and her team if they were to ask. And can you tell us what you think were the best decisions you made in preparation for that 2001 election, in terms of getting ready to move to government and take over?
I'll tell you the worst decision I made.
Okay, I was going to ask that too.
The worst decision I made was I was elected leader. I think it was September 11th of 1992. 1993. And I should have picked up the phone right away and called Jack Weisgerber. Mm-hmm. And I didn't, because I thought that would be a little bit arrogant. Who the heck did I think I was? He was in the legislature. I wasn't. I thought I'd give it some time. And then some members of what was then called the BC Liberal Party jumped in and said, he's never coming to us. We can't possibly have them. And that created a schism for us, which was a mistake. So I think if you want to form a majority government in opposition to the New Democrats, you've got to reach out to everyone and try to bring them in. Good. And you've got to find common ground that you're trying to move forward with. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons. And then what happened, honestly, Geoff, is I used to go around the province. I'll tell you this story. I might have told it to you guys before. But so I'm the leader of the BC Liberal Party. I don't have a seat in the House. I got a seat, I think, in 94. But there wasn't really many people that I could go back to and say, what did you experience? And, I wasn't going to ask Mike Harcourt what he thought, right? So I went to Peter Lougheed. And the first thing that Peter Lougheed said, yeah, he'd be glad to talk to me. We talked in his backyard. And he said, Gord, the first thing you have to remember is forget about labels. The first thing you have to remember is you go to ridings and you find out who might win there. And my favorite story is, because I did that, I then went around and tried to, I was fortunate because I'd been mayor. I'd been involved with the Union of BC Municipalities, which was all over the province. So I could go and talk to mayors and say, who do you think might win, et cetera. Anyways, we went to Okanagan boundary, and you'll remember that there was a gentleman there named Bill Barlee, who was one of those friendly, affable New Democrats. There are some, believe it or not. So anyways, he was there and traveling, and I would go around, I'd say, well, who could beat Bill Barlee? And people would say, no one. There's no one that can beat Bill Barlee. He's incredibly popular. And then they'd say, well, there may be one guy. His name's Bill Barasoff. He's the chair of the school board. And it didn't matter whether I was in Oliver or a Soyuz or whether I was over in the eastern part of the riding. They said, maybe Bill Barlee. Maybe Bill Barasoff. So I went and I said to Rick Thorpe, who decided he was running with me, ask Bill Barasoff to come to a speech that I was giving, a major speech, at the Chamber of Commerce or something like that. So he came, and I said to Rick afterwards, how'd it go? He said, well, he thought it was okay. So then I said, well, the next time I come, I'd like to meet with him and see if I can recruit him. So I asked him, and as is often the case, he said, no, I couldn't do it. I don't want to do that. So anyways, I convinced him, or he decided he was going to run. He ran. He won that seat by 27 votes. Mm-hmm. That was all Bill Barasoff. That was not the BC, I can guarantee you, that was not the BC Liberals that won that. It was Bill Barasoff that won. So I do think that's why it's a lot of work. I'm not one of the people that says the most important thing you can be is elected and sit in the legislature. The legislature is a very, well, it's a cocooned area, and it's not reaching out to the province. It's not bringing people in. They don't even know they're meeting half the time, right? So I think that was the biggest single lesson I learned I got from Peter Lougheed, who'd done a similar thing. He'd gone from 3 seats in the legislature in Alberta to a majority government. So
Well, if I'm
he
not
knew a lot
mistaken,
about him.
you contacted and brought in George Abbott at that time.
I didn't actually. I don't think I recruited
Was that not
George.
you?
I think
Okay.
George volunteered.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was
Well, but
fun.
he was again someone with municipal background who had been
Yeah.
NDP adjacent at least, and
Yeah.
had found his way into a cabinet
I,
position.
I actually, honestly, I wouldn't have known that he was that at the time, right?
Hmm.
I think I know I'm more aware of it now, but I wasn't. I didn't know.
We all are. Well, you did recruit. I mean, when I look back at the '96 election and going forward, it's striking how young the caucus was.
I
It was
love that. I totally love that, and it's one of the things that I've been saying to all the old guys like me. Right? It's time for a new generation of leadership.
yeah,
It's time for new ideas. It's time for new approaches. All those, you know. I did a little speech to the Governor General's conference on what they called young leaders. I asked how many of them were under 40. Maybe 3 hands went up.
Hmm.
yeah,
I was 38 when I was elected mayor of Vancouver, right? I did not think I was young. I thought I could make a contribution. I think we have to reach out to people. Christy, I think she ran with us in '96. I think Christy
yeah,
was maybe 29. Gary Collins
yeah,
was 29.
yeah.
It's
Mike
do
DeYoung.
youth. Pardon me?
Mike DeYoung was another one around that age group.
Yeah, Mike was 32. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember that. Yeah.
yeah. So they're that. Yeah, and I think the BC Liberals kind of aged out. It was the group that
Well,
under Andrew and Kevin, was they were getting out. They were getting on in years, right? And
I
there was a
think you always have to renew, and you renew the party. Like I used to say, you might remember this. I used to say, I don't want a youth wing that eats pizza and drinks beer. I want them to give us ideas. I want them to say, this is what we might be able to do. And candidly, I think today we need young people to set our agenda. I, I don't think that I'm not going to tell them what to do, but I'm glad to help people know the sort of the pitfalls they ran into and what they might do or not do and things like that. So it's,
Well, we're going to get
I
to the
think you got to
future,
renew.
but
That's every party. I'm sure that's every party.
but before we get to the renewal, what would you see as the enduring legacies of your period as premier?
Um, well, I think we did a lot of good policy stuff. I think a lot of it's disappeared, but I think we did some good policy things. I think the most important thing we did was revive the economy. I think the economy got going. Job creation was way up in the province. Investment was way up in the province. One of my favorite things that was ever said about me that I heard was at one point Jack Poole introduced me and he said Gordon Campbell gave BC its swagger back. I want people to feel confidence and feel hope and feel like, boy, this is the place we want to be. I actually, when I left Premier, we had our slogan was the best place on earth. Christy decided to change that. I still think we're the best place on earth. We just have to keep on striving to be the best place on earth. And that's how people feel. They're a little, I think, down right now. I think people are worried right now. But we have incredible opportunities in British Columbia. And I think government can be a part of making sure we realize that.
Guests, as BC's hometown team, presenting sponsor TELUS shares the values that matter most to British Columbians. And not just the humans, but all the flora and fauna that call this beautiful place home. That's why TELUS has announced their first ever biodiversity action plan, detailing their commitment to preserve and restore the natural world their networks run through. TELUS knows that running a national network means their infrastructure touches some of Canada's most sensitive habitats. So they're working to stop and reverse that impact through responsible operational practices and locally led restoration efforts. That means taking a hard look at every part of their business, from infrastructure to supply chain, to understand how their operations affect our diverse ecosystems, and committing to transparent annual reporting on biodiversity indicators so that impact and restoration can be measured. For TELUS, minimizing impact is only half of the equation. By leaning into technical tools like AI, ground-based sensors, and satellite imagery, they're building a more detailed picture of BC's forests, coastlines, and watersheds, contributing data that deepens our understanding of these ecosystems beyond tracking their own targets. TELUS is also partnering with Indigenous communities to co-design restoration projects rooted in both Western science and Indigenous knowledge that support local employment and cultural practices, recognizing that understanding our ecosystems means listening to the people who have stewarded them the longest. At the end of the day, for TELUS, being BC's hometown team means more than building a network. It means taking care of the place we call home.
One of the tough challenges you had to take on was you came in when there was a deficit. You brought in a core review and made sound fiscal management kind of a hallmark of BC Liberal government over the years that lasted throughout to 2017. What is it, sometimes there's not really a political incentive to do those things, to control spending. How did you manage to implement that with cabinet, with the caucus, when they had to endure some kind of tough news in some cases in their ridings, and maybe, usually at a caucus meeting they come with a spending list, not a list of spending cuts?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the real challenges we face both federally and provincially now in Canada. I think people have lost track of what it means. First of all, there's only one taxpayer. I actually think Canada's pretty much upside down now. We have the money that flows to the feds at the top. They've got money that they sort of decide discretionarily how they're going to spend it. You then have the province, which is saddled with healthcare and education costs, both of which are continuing to grow because of demographics and a whole bunch of other things. And then we have the cities who, frankly, I would far prefer for the province and the feds to get out of cities to give them more resources so that they can make decisions and be accountable, as opposed to, it's like, I don't really understand how Fort St. John works. Why would I be able to make decisions there? And I used to feel that when people from, for example, the North would come and tell us in Vancouver when I was mayor, this is what you should do. They didn't even know the city. And I think that one of the things that's a challenge for us today is to recognize that there's only one taxpayer and there's no such thing as government money. It is phenomenal to me. I think the words flow out and people don't think of what they mean. So just to put it in context for you, 1 billion seconds is 31 years, 31 point some odd years. That's 1 billion seconds. We throw around billions now like it was nothing, right? A trillion, which is we have a $1.4 trillion national deficit or debt right now. It takes 31,000 years to get to a trillion. That's a huge change in sort of scale. So I think it's time in the 21st century for us to think about government, and we have to right-size government. Core review was not across the board, 3% across the board, and aren't we wonderful? It was saying, does government have to do this? What are the things that I would say this, that I would start with this question. What would you ask the government to do? And I think it's shocking how small what people would ask. But what interests ask is different than that. So what do I want our healthcare to do? I want it to provide care to patients. It's not doing that now. It's not doing that. We have to change things to actually reflect what we really want as citizens. And I think you have to talk to people about that in ways that they connect with what it is. There's, when any time a government stands up and says they're going to spend this money, they're spending more of your money. And right now, I haven't heard anyone tell me that, if they could just send more money to the government, I'd feel better off. They want to keep it at home so they can make their own choices. The thing is, there's consequences for those choices, right? You don't increase the public service. Public servants are, I think this is one of my lessons, Jess, that I would say. There's no such thing as one person doing it. There's nothing in public life that one person does. You can try and be a leader and lead your group, but you need not just your caucus, you need the public service to help you get to where you want to go, but you have to define that, and then you have to be dedicated to that. So I was dedicated to trying to balance our budgets. We did. I think we started, our first balance was 2004. I think that went on till about 2009, maybe 2010. I can't remember the exact one. It shrunk for 2008-9 for sure. Then they regained it, I think, in about 2014. But that takes work. And you can't keep saying to government, do more, do more, do more. We have to do better. We have to do smarter. We have to think what's working and what isn't. And I think if we would throw out all the labels and look at the results we're getting, what were we trying to get when we started? Let's assume people are working in good faith. What are they trying to accomplish? And then see if we're accomplishing it. We're not. We have to change it. You have to change government just like you and I have to change our lives and change our decisions in what we're doing. And I think governments are very, very reticent to make any change. Sometimes it's tough, but I will say this. Sorry, Jeff.
Taxpayers and taxpayers, of course. Chip Wilson and I are different, and then somebody who's working in construction is a different taxpayer again. But this tax question, you tried to make a fundamental reform, which I think a lot of people of various political backgrounds would agree, which was the HST. Is that a frustration that you weren't able to conclude that one? That one fell to the wayside?
No, I think it isn't. I mean, I think it's too bad. I think it should have been done. But I get people get to make their choices about that. But I think the challenge today is, you can't be if you're going into public life because you want to be Mr. Popular, don't waste your time. If you're going to do something significant, you're not going to be there are going to be people that tell you you're not popular. And I think one of the challenges, I was the premier. Well, you know this, but I was a premier. So I had lots of people telling me, good on you, Gord, go for it. Come on, let's get this done. Blah, 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 blah. I also had people saying you're a jerk and, throwing stuff at my house and, all this stuff that happens, right? And, you get vilified and put in, you get a piece of cardboard, you're radical or whatever. In today's world, any Canadian who wants to make change is told he's Donald Trump or she's Donald Trump. Doesn't matter. That's, that's the epithet that people use in Canada now. Here's the deal. I get, thanks or keep going. The caucus, the people that are out on their land, they get the bad stuff. They get, you're doing this wrong and that's wrong and the next thing. And the most important constituency you have once you're elected is the caucus. They have to be comfortable with where you're going. And honestly, we made some significant changes in 2001, 1, 2, 3. The caucus was never questioning that because they knew why they were running in 2001. And one of the things that I used to say to people, I don't care what you want to be. I want to know what you want to do. What is it? Why are you doing this? Why are you coming to meetings and sitting there for hours and all that sort of stuff? What is it you want to do? So I did want to get the economy back. I did want to try and reform healthcare. But all of those things, that's that time, 25 years ago. I would want to do the same thing again today. I would say these are things that we have to do. And I think one of the things is if you allow politicians to be just general, I really would like the world to be nicer. Yeah, we all would. What are you going to do? And if you say what you're going to do, now we can hold you in a way that I understand it. Now you can be held to account. And that's what I think we're missing right now is people feel disconnected from the public discussion.
So when you were in that first term particularly, you led the largest caucus in BC history, 77 MLAs to start.
Yeah.
And most of them were private members, not in cabinet. So that was an interesting caucus dynamic between the Premier's office and the rest of caucus. Mm-hmm. I can recall you commenting to caucus saying, tell me what you think, tell me what's really on your mind. So I'm kind of interested from your experience, like what helped you as a leader in terms of the feedback you got from MLAs and what did you want from them? What do you think would have made for the healthiest possible caucus power relationship there?
Well, I think the healthiest thing is, and I used to say this, in caucus, I want to hear from everybody. If you think we're doing something wrong, I want to hear you think we're doing something wrong. I'd like you to tell me what you think is right. I remember one caucus member, I was saying that to him. He says, but there's so much paper to read. I said, yeah, that's part of the deal. This is not about reading the headline of the Vancouver Sun or whatever it was at the time. It's about doing the homework and then coming and saying what you think. And I actually sometimes stood up for caucus members who were telling us they thought we were doing it wrong. And other people would say, oh, no, be quiet. I said, no, this is where you're supposed to get this out, right? So I think you have to create that environment. I tried to meet with all caucus members once a year, one-on-one, to hear from them. What is it they're trying to do? What are they hearing? What are they worried about? And, one of the challenges, I think this was a shortcoming for me. I used to say to people, come to me if you've got a problem, talk to me early. And they would self-select themselves out. They'd say, well, no, it's not a big problem yet. I don't want to wait. The Premier's busy or whatever it was. I mean, I'm still the same guy, I thought, as I was when I ran. And so sometimes when they hold off, you lose the opportunity to deal with something sort of quickly, and it takes 5 minutes instead of an hour and a half to figure out what's the problem, how do we fix it, etc. It's a big family, and you have to recognize in the family there are, there are challenges, and it's one of the most tiring things to do, I think, is to work with people in your caucus and make them part of what you're doing. We tried that with you might remember we had government caucus committees, et cetera, where they were trying to review legislation, et cetera. There is, people are running because they want to make a contribution. How can you do that? I think the challenge is to take all of the disparate ideas and say, what's the core that we need to do? Let's focus on that. Let's get that done. And then we can do the next stuff, but let's do the first stuff. So I found it was more challenging the longer we were elected. Like we were elected in 1, we were elected in 5, we were elected in 9. The kind of people that are running in 9 are different than the kind of people that were running in 1, because they were in 1, it was sort of brand new and let's get going and, we're going to change things. By 9, there are people that think, well, I'd like to run because it'd be nice to be in cabinet. That's not why most people are running in 2001, right? So just the dynamic changes of the caucus and et cetera as you go through it. But
it's why you need renewal.
It's why you need renewal. And frankly, it's why, you shouldn't stay to be premier for 25 years. I recognize that when you get started, you sort of take actions, right? You can become part of the problem after a while, and you have to recognize that and step away. That's what I did. And I think it was 2011 or 2010. I said that I was going to do that after the Olympics.
So looking to the present and forward,
yeah,
you were a strong supporter of Carolyn Elliott, who came very close as you could get and not make it.
Yeah.
What is the biggest challenge facing Carolyn Findlay right now in your mind? You came into a very united situation. This is not united at the moment, or are we missing something? Is it more united than we think?
It wasn't united when I came in. People forget. I had a leadership. There were 7 people, 6 people running for me.
You couldn't even get all the Gordons behind you.
Right. I had 2 Gordons that left the party. They said, no, this is not going to be good. We don't like it. So the truth is she has the same challenges and tasks that I did. I think she has to go out. She has to build leadership across the province. It can't be built out of the Lower Mainland. That she's got to go to the north and find out who's a strong leader for her there, who's a good strong leader for her in the Kootenays. I think she has to articulate a clear, sort of concrete program of action that attracts people. You don't get attracted just because you're saying nice stuff. You have to say, this is what we're going to try and do. And I think you attract people. And I think she's got that to do. She'll decide whether she's going to run or not run. I'm not one of the people that says you must be in the legislature. I think if she feels like she has to be, that's her choice. I say to people, if people ask me for advice, I'll give them advice, but I recognize who I am. I'm a former, if I've decided I don't want to be premier, you've decided you do, here's my advice. Now you get to do with it what you want. So my advice is we have to have a strong program for reviving the economy. We have to deal with DRIPA and the First Nations issues. We have to deal with healthcare in Vancouver. Healthcare is not particularly great in Vancouver, but it's way worse in other parts of the province. And we have to recognize that. In Vancouver, if my emergency ward closes down, I can go to one half an hour away. When they have emergency wards closing in the Caribou, it's 3 hours to the closest emergency. And that hour can make a huge difference in people's health and their long-term, their hopes for the long term. So I think there's huge challenges that we face in BC and in Canada. And I think the biggest challenge we have is to get away from the tyranny of the status quo, stop, wishfully thinking, boy, I hope this will go away, and stop the willful blindness. The facts are we're not doing well economically. We're not doing well in healthcare. Our kids are falling behind in education. It's time for us to look at how we can change things.
So switching gears a little, since we've got you here, as a former chair of the Greater Vancouver Regional District, I think for a couple terms.
Yeah.
Metro Vancouver is having its difficulties these days. The region's obviously grown a lot in the last 30 years as well.
Yeah.
Do you think we're at a point where we need to think about mega city, or is it just a matter of doing a better job with the structures we've got here?
I don't think it's ever structurally, it's not structure that makes the difference. It's looking at what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. I think Metro Vancouver is, candidly, I mean, I don't pay the kind of attention that you guys do. I think it's out of control. I think when these guys are pulling down, I can't believe how much money they're pulling down as chairs. You know, when I was first elected, when I was first sort of went to the regional district board, I wanted to go because I thought it was important for the region to work together and for Vancouver to recognize we were part of the region, not the only part. We were part of the region. When I was elected chair of the board, I didn't even know there was an extra stipend to be chair of the board. I didn't even think about that, right? And we're now people with $500,000 a year they're pulling down from going to meetings for 10 minutes or 20 minutes. So I think it gets back to what I was saying earlier, you know, as government generally. What is it we want our cities to do? So let's decide that, and let's see if we can give them some resources to it. Then let's look at what the region is doing. And let's actually demand accountability. Ask people in Greater Vancouver how many people know who sits in the regional district board or the metro board. Ask them what it is even. I'll tell you what it is. It's a huge bill that's coming down the pike, and it's a property tax bill. It's a regressive bill. It hurts people. It works against all of the issues that people claim to care about, like affordable housing. I'm so tired of people talking about that and not doing anything about it. So I think it's getting core. Pardon me, Jeff?
Well, they're doing things that are not nice to have. They're must-haves, like water supply, sewage treatment.
That's a utility. So do that.
Yeah, sure, but you know, it's not the salaries that are. It's the management of the large projects. It's these new requirements for the very big expansion for development.
I'm not pretending it's just the salaries. Obviously, it's not the salaries, but the salaries are symptomatic of what the problem is. If I can tell you this, if you're paid those sorts of dollars, you better be holding everyone to account. You better know what you're doing and what your costs are going to be. I can't remember the last time they brought something in on budget. You know, bringing things on budget is not something that's a luxury. It's something that you have to learn how to do. And there's ways to do it. And they don't hold themselves to account for that. They make, you know, we're sort of living in the world of expedience and excuses. And so, you know, well, yes, I'll do this and that's okay. But, you know, the North Shore is one example. They're going to do an Iona treatment plant. And if they do it in the same way, it's going to balloon. They can't have everything ballooning at 2 and 3 times their estimated costs and think, well, that's okay. We're doing a job. They're not doing a job. That's what a result is. If you don't get results you're after, then you're not doing your job. That's what
it's the estimation of capital costs. It seems to be an affliction that's impacting the province, municipal governments, probably the federal government too. You know, what do you have a theory on why that's been happening?
It's wishful thinking, and it's not actually doing. You know, when you do public-private partnership, there's a lot of work that goes into a public-private partnership. You got to know what you're demanding. You got to know what you're expecting and what you're going to be paid for. And the people that are going to bid on that have got to know what they have to deliver or they don't get somewhere. I think we've lost discipline. We did lots of projects we brought in on budget when I was elected. We brought them in on budget. That was an important thing to do. You can't have projects going up at 3, you know, it's not. I can't think of the excuse for something going up at 300 times the rate of their estimated cost to begin with. That's number one. Number two, yes, COVID was a problem. It's also over. We should be past that problem now. And there's still disciplines you have. The world doesn't get built on massive, you know, if you think of just the debts that we're building up, if you think of the deficit we have in the province, $13.3 billion deficit on top of $4.1 billion of new taxes, which are going to mean the deficit's going to grow. That doesn't make any sense. It's time for us to make some sense.
To the Metro Board, which is an important but not massive organization, they called a halt to the project, sued, wound up getting paid $250 million by the contractors who must have felt there was some mistakes on their side or they wouldn't have.
I'm sure there was, yeah.
So, you know, I think there was some accountability, but this troubles me. And you're one of the people who's the only person I know who was a mayor, also head of the UBCM. Yeah. You've seen it from every direction. So talk to us a bit about policing. That's another one the public are very upset about, the extortion crisis and so on. The Hells Angels don't have regional boundaries. They don't, stop at Boundary Road. Is it time for regional policing? I mean, I think Ujjal Dosanjh was proposing that for years. Is that a dead letter too?
I honestly can't give you the answer. I can tell you what I tried to do when I was the chair of the region. So I was told by all the municipalities that they were never included. So one of the things that I created was what I called the Council of Councils. As the chair of the region, I went to every municipality. I talked to them about what we were trying to do. I asked them what they wanted us to do. We had regular, probably once every, maybe twice a year meetings of the Council of Councils. And we were creating what we called Creating Our Future program at that time. So I think, rather than say it's got to be regional policing, I think it's better to bring the region, the mayors together and say, let's look at these problems we have. How do we solve these problems? You tell us, right? And I think one of the problems is leadership matters in these things. And if you're actually leading and you're listening to what they're telling you, you can sometimes find a solution. If you don't listen, if you think there's an easy solution, there's not. I wish I could say we would have discovered it and done it by now, but I don't think it's an easy solution. I think it's work to get there. And it means let's bring them together. Let's talk directly about it. Let's hear what the mayor of Anmore thinks, not just the mayor of Vancouver, but let's hear what the mayor of Surrey thinks and the mayor of North Vancouver. Whether we like it or not, I think there's 18 municipalities in the region. Bring them together. Some are RCMP, some are independent. I can tell you one of the toughest jobs that I felt that I had when I was mayor of Vancouver was being chair of the police board. It's a tough job. And let's not pretend these are easier. There's sort of headline solutions. There's hard work solutions that are out there. And I do think, we often hear about left and right. I'm tired of hearing about left and right. I think we should work on smart and stupid, and we should strive for smart. And you know how you define stupid? Something that doesn't work. That's what we call in our lives stupid. So let's not do that anymore. Let's move towards being smarter about how we deliver those things. And let's invite people in. Let's have a real conversation about solving the problem. I think it's the same thing with housing. Candidly, every politician I hear talks about how they're going to spend more on housing. And there's costs that they impose on the system that are just there, and we can get rid of them if we want. But it means change, and sometimes that change is disrupted. But if your priority is affordable housing, we can do a lot more than we do right now to make it affordable. Like, start with what do we mean by affordable?
Before we let you go, Gordon, I wanted to ask you about the World Cup that's coming to Vancouver. The first game's coming up this weekend. You were instrumental bringing the Olympics here in 2010.
Yeah.
What do you hope Vancouver and the province can get out of this World Cup experience that's going to come here over the next month?
Well, I think it's completely different than the Olympics, honestly. But I hope they feel good about it. I hope that they get some joy out of it. It's important in our lives to remember how lucky we are to be here. It's not just to talk about problems, but it's to say, boy, are we ever lucky to be here. I am incredibly lucky to have had the life I've had, to live in the place that I've lived and the places I've lived, right? So let's take a moment, first of all, maybe to discover the world. I think from British Columbia, Canada, and the United States, it's good to recognize the rest of the world is not like us. We are really, really fortunate to live here. So let's have I always felt that I can remember going to Turin for the 2006 Olympics, and I didn't feel like it was really very much. And I remember coming back and I said, I want everyone in Vancouver to feel like they were part of the Olympics. And I think we accomplished that, whether it was Vancouver or Whistler, whether it was Surrey or Chilliwack, Prince George, Fort St. John, people felt like they were part of the Olympics, and Canada felt like it belonged to them. I'm not sure they're quite there with that with the World Cup yet, but I'd sure like to see that sort of spirit lift up and maybe give a little bit of, excitement and fun to people. And I'm sure there'll be lots going on. I'd like the Canadian football team or soccer team to do incredibly well. Let's hope.
Help if they win, yeah.
When they win, I think there'll be as much celebration as when we won the gold medal hockey game for men and women in the 2010 Olympics.
Yeah. Well, Gordon, we appreciate you stopping by on this to mark the anniversary of your election in 2001. Appreciate you
Yep.
passing on your wisdom and learnings to help today's leaders as they work through all these challenges we've talked about. And we
Well,
hope to have you back again sometime soon.
great. Well, thanks you guys for doing it. I think it's important to have the conversations. There's not enough conversation about what's possible, and I think we are incredibly fortunate to be part of this country and part of the province. Let's just make sure we give that gift to our kids and our grandkids. Let's remember the generations that follow us. Not talk about the past. Let's look at the future and let's reach for it. Let's go big. Let's do something great.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Good to talk to you, Geoff. Good to see you, Mike.
Yeah. Oh, we're back in the strategy suite.
Yeah.
Geoff and I.
Always interesting to hear from Gordon Campbell. There's no one else, in my view, in BC political history, but you study it more than I do, Mike, who was mayor of Vancouver 3 times. During that period, he also was head of the UBCM, which meant, or not the UBCM, he was head of the UBCM, but he also was chair of Metro. It was called the GVRD in those
All
days.
at the same time.
And brought in the so-called clouds of change, which is a huge planning process, consensus-based, that really changed the face of the Lower Mainland.
Yeah.
Then went on, and after a bit of a struggle, wound up becoming premier 3 times, including during the Olympics. So really a dominant personality, if not the dominant personality of BC politics for a long, long time. Very little that he hasn't seen.
You know, I mean, obviously he got a lot of credit for rebuilding the BC Liberal Party, which he led for 18 years, and 8 hard years in opposition, which he mentioned. But, you know, it's not often talked about that he rebuilt the NPA in Vancouver.
Right.
And which had been in the wilderness. And in 1984, he ran for then named position of alderman and got elected in a minority council. Mike Harcourt was mayor. And the next time, as a 38-year-old, was elected mayor, you know, and served 3 terms. So,
well, he defeated Harry Rankin, who'd been elected 11 times and had led the polls most of the time. And that was involved in Rankin's campaign. And the interesting thing about that campaign, which was still engraved in my memory, was that Campbell's one-word slogan was positively. Okay, Harry had always been opposition. There was a huge generational gap between the two of them, and in spite of Harry being a very, very popular opposition councillor for many, many years, topping the polls, he was not able to pull off a mayoralty win. And I think that's a mistake that people make underestimating the nuances that voters are considering when they go to the polls, because they wanted Harry there to keep the government honest, but they didn't expect him to be the mayor. And when it came time with Campbell was definitely a youth movement at that time, and the term positively sort of defined how he approached everything. No matter how tough stuff got, it was still the best place on earth, and we were positive.
well, the NPA went on a big run in Vancouver from 86 to 2002, I think, when Larry Campbell got elected. 16 years. BC Liberals went 16 years. That seems to be the number, you know. So
it's a very, very outside limit that you can maybe sometimes breach, but we don't see it.
Well, at that point, if you don't renew internally, the voters will renew for you.
Which feels like a period of time we may be in now, based on some recent polls.
Well, let's get into it. KLF, Carrie Lynn Finley for the uninitiated. In her first week on the job, she got her ticket on WestJet, or probably went WestJet to Alberta, and went to the Daniel Smith fundraiser Friday night. And there's photos on that KLF's put out on our social media of her and Daniel Smith. So really, kind of doubling down on that brand of populist conservatism. What do you think of her first week on the job?
Well, I know that Premier David Eby was pretty annoyed about it and spoke about it in some clips that his team cut out and put on social media. So it was something they wanted to emphasize, the connection between Carrie Lynn Findlay and the Alberta Conservatives, UCP, was seen as a big deal for them. I don't think the public was generally aware, or it would shock the public to do it. It was it was sort of an odd choice, but when I thought about it, I thought, well, what should she have done?
It's on brand.
Yeah. I think for the base that really wanted her to win, the association makes perfect sense to them. And the risk for the NDP is that she appears, in some respects, to have moved rent-free into the Premier's head already because he was making a number of comments about it, when in fact, there's a lot of other things that he could be speaking about that I think would be more on his message as opposed to amplifying his anxieties about her.
Yeah, I think, well, it's early days. The jury hasn't been assembled yet for the Carrie Lynn Finlay era. We'll see how things go. I'm just going to note some of the caucus endorsements she had, because I think in the days ahead there's likely going to be some key appointments, and we'll see if there's a Venn diagram between this list and who the caucus leadership is going to be. Sheldon Clare.
The shadow cabinet, yeah.
Well, Sheldon Clare from Prince George Caribou is one guy who was an early supporter. He announced his own leadership run, which didn't really get off the tarmac, but he picked the winner, as did Steve Cooner, who's the Attorney General critic. And Cooner, who's the MLA for Richmond-Queensborough, there's an interesting backstory here where he had announced his leadership bid, and I don't think anyone thought it was going to go anywhere, and yet, like Claire, he picked the winner. One of the people that supported him in his early bid went on to end up as the campaign manager for Carrie Lynn Finlay, Chris Dyson. So Cooner made a real contribution to the KLF campaign. So we'll see where he ends up. Also, we've got Macklin McCall from West Kelowna, Sharon Hartwell from the north, Bulkley Valley Stikine, Anna Kindy from North Island, Dr. Anna Kindy, Heather Moss from Chilliwack, Lawrence Mock from Maple Ridge, David Williams from Shuswap, Tara Armstrong, the Independent, Jordan Keeley, the Independent, we'll get to in a second, and her husband, Brent Chapman. Now, she said she wants to get into the House as soon as possible. At least that's what she said on results night on May 30th. It would seem that the easiest, most straightforward path to get in the House is to, say, hey, dear, can I have your seat? You can have it back later. And so far they haven't made that move. Brent Chapman hasn't sacrificed for his wife quite yet. It might be a tough conversation with other MLAs who are asked to give up their seat and say, well, why don't you maybe go talk to your husband? So we'll see how that all works.
Well, in the other seats, I haven't looked at the numbers, but may not be as safe as, no seat's ever totally safe, but
yeah,
as safe as that one. And I think that even if she was to agree with her husband that she should run in his place quite soon, it's unlikely that she would be in the House before the budget. There's no meaningful...
For the budget?
Well,
surely she'd be in before the end of the calendar
the Premier
year.
doesn't have to call it for 6 months. He could wait quite a long time.
Yeah, usually they accommodate an opposition leader, don't they?
Yeah, I don't know, do they?
Well,
we'll see how accommodating people feel.
It doesn't seem like fair cricket if he held it up too long. But I do recall from my own experience, leaders running for by-elections can be perilous. Christy Clark ran in Gordon Campbell's seat in Point Grey in 2011, and David Eby almost knocked her off in that by-election. I'll tell you.
It was the start of his career, for sure.
It was the start of my blood pressure, that's for sure. But Christie pulled it off, but lost the next time in the general, which meant she had to go seek another by-election. And at that time, even though she'd come off a dramatic election victory, there weren't a lot of caucus members who were really that keen about parting with their seat. And from a leadership perspective, it's like you don't want to take any chances, especially not what we went through before. You really got to be sure there's not going to be a nasty surprise. And Ben Stewart was gracious enough to cooperate and provided her with a safe resting place for her so she could continue her work as premier up in Kelowna. And but it is I'm sure it's not an easy conversation she's having right now with caucus, especially when you're opposition leader. you don't have as much leverage to make it happen. I think Dave Barrett had to get Bob Williams to step aside. I remember that. There's
That's
been
right.
a few of these
No, it's
circumstances over the years.
No, it's not fun. It's not easy, and it's distracting for a lot of people in the party because if you can find Pierre Poilievre had to go all the way to to Alberta to find a place to go, and it's not where he wants to be for long term. It's probably an issue to be respectful to the voters there and spend time with them. You've got to find some. But I also think that when you run through that list, and this says more about me than it does about the MLAs, many of them are unknown qualities. Like they have not been in the front bench for the most part, except for Cooner. And we'll see where she goes with a lot of these questions. There were also some people who did not support her who were emerging stars, like Alia Warbus, I think, for one. And it'll be interesting to see how she tries to incorporate them if she keeps Warbus, for example, as House Leader, which is an important job.
Yeah. In the meantime, Mario Canseco came out with a poll this week that showed that it was pretty neck and neck between the NDP and the BC Conservatives. Pretty close. I'm trying to remember which poll said what. I think Leger had the Conservatives up a few points. But
Well, everybody shows it tighter. So we had that first poll by Angus Reid showing David Eby's approval down something like 10 points over the last year.
Yeah.
Then we had the Leger poll, which is a bigger, more substantive poll, which showed them tied or the Conservatives slightly ahead, certainly within the margin of error. Then we had Canseco also showing a Conservative strengthening. With the new question, which others had not asked, about whether there would be interest in a new center-right party, which is something that you've mused about.
Yeah, well, on the Canseco poll first, he actually asked the question, if the BC Liberals came back, what would that mean? And basically what it means is 15% of the vote, with the other parties around 35. I think it pretty much drew evenly from the NDP and the Conservatives. So that's kind of interesting. And I think 47% said the province needs a center-right party to serve as an alternative to the two other parties. So that's, that's a starting pistols fired on that discussion. I think for sure there are a lot of conversations happening in BC politics right now about among people who feel unrepresented by both parties. And, it's not an easy task to stand up a new political party, even if there's one that's sitting there.
That's what I was going to say.
Resting.
Not easy is the understatement of the year.
Yeah, but that's it's money. It's 93 riding associations. It's an executive. It's Election Act compliance. It's it takes a lot of people to do these things, and it's really a test of the resolve of people if they want to do it or not. Like, it's one thing to strategize about it and be an armchair quarterback, but it's who's going to put boots on the ground and make that happen. And so that remains to be seen, But
I would say, in agreement with your point, that people who point to the rise of the Conservatives, which has been meteoric, as proof that it can be done, are not really paying attention to the fact that the structure was there legally already.
Yeah.
Certain very talented people moved in and took ownership of it. They got John Rusted in. They did catch a wave, but we're still seeing all of that very hurried work shake itself out in terms of the loss of Rustad, the whole leadership process, and so on. So that's taken a long period of time. It's been a huge gift to the NDP. And those who are concerned about the formation of this center party are often people who argue that no matter what you may think of Carolyn Findlay, creating this center party would be a guarantee of re-election for David Eby. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's their argument.
Beware of unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of the people probably thinking about this and wanting to do something are people who tend to vote federal Liberal, right? They're the group that feels most unrepresented right now.
Yeah.
Just generally. Well, where are the federal Liberals voting today? They're voting BC NDP, right? So where would they be strongest? Vancouver, North Shore, those types of areas. Mainly voting NDP. Now, the question is, can a centrist alternative fuse into something more than that? Can it fuse into what Gordon Wilson did in 91? Is he kind of attached it to some kind of suburban brush fire that got seats out in the valley. And, basically a successful free enterprise coalition over the years has been a combination of, more urban professionals with suburban populists and interior, natural resource interests. So, that's putting these things together is not easy. What the recipe is, it requires leadership. We'll see. But what's different now compared to 2 weeks ago is that there's a lot more chatter about it. There is a group that's come out and with a 19-slide, I haven't looked at it yet or have seen it, but a 19-slide PowerPoint deck that's, not sure if it was ChatGPT or Claude or who did it, or maybe they did it themselves. But, a former Vision Vancouver official apparently, who was promoting a kind of a liberal party of British Columbia that sounds very much like a, closely affiliated vehicle of the Liberal Party of Canada. Not that they have anything to do with it, but I think that's probably the wrong approach. I think, I think anything that happens in the center has to be inclusive and attract people to it, not drive people away because they're so closely associated with one particular point of view. So, anyways, more to come on that, I'm sure.
Well, I think it's interesting that you mentioned the Vision Vancouver angle, because that had to be a name that was picked at the last minute to front a new civic organization. You see in the civic politics of Vancouver now, Karima Lam, who historically was a conservative and worked with Kevin Falcon, then with Ken Sim, taking the term liberals for a civic party. You have others registering the conservatives civically. I'm not sure about all of these things, but to stand up a new party with a new name in the middle, I think would be, as you say, a monumental undertaking. So we'll see if it actually comes to fruition. It takes a lot of pressure.
I'll finish the point by saying, if it doesn't happen now, it will never happen.
Right.
Like the conditions for it right now are as good as they'll ever get, because you've got a conservative leader who's decided she's very clearly a federal Polyev conservative and makes no bones about it, and has made a point of distinction.
Overtly anti-liberal, yeah.
Is not welcoming former BC Liberals or anything like that. Maybe she'll change her tune, I don't know. And then on the other side, you've got an NDP government that's got a bit of a time for change problem. And so for those who are looking for change but can't stomach the Conservatives, is there enough space in the middle? That's a mathematical challenge which will be hard to solve.
Well, and I think the other thing to consider the NDP situation for a minute is that the Conseco poll, consistent with lots of polls, so it's not new, but showed that British Columbians are worried about housing costs, they're worried about crime, and they're worried about health care. Actually, on those issues, the NDP administration has some good stories to tell. Extortion attempts and shootings are down. They're opening a lot of new hospitals, which is a proxy in a lot of ways for improving healthcare. It's not going to make a dramatic difference right now in someone's life, but that's hard to do. They got agreements with the doctors and the nurses, which is important too. Both of those are expenditures, but it'll mean peace in the valley there. Just to qualify the nurses, they still have to vote on that, so there could be a surprise there, I guess. I don't know. But the doctors ratified by a huge margin. So, with the possibility as well that there could be good economic news, which is the critical factor in the poll, with a second FID or final investment decision for LNG Canada too, which is becoming more and more concrete as the contractors get ready to prepare the site and things like that. There's a possibility that if the EB team, and they're in a retreat this week, a caucus retreat, can find a new mojo, that they could make it more competitive than it has been in the last little while.
Well, they may think they found their new mojo now, because I think they may feel like they got a lucky break with the outcome.
They did, but you got to make your own breaks, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said earlier, you got to be careful what you wish for. I mean, Carolyn Finley has a populist appeal which could reach right into ridings like Kootenay-Monashee and some of the North Island, mid-North Island ridings, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But certainly it shakes things up. And, that's probably net benefit for the NDP that the landscape gets shaken up, because they need to shake themselves up. they're going to get reelected.
Yeah.
Well, let's just touch quickly on independent MLA Jordan Keeley. A special prosecutor was appointed February 9th, we learned this week, after, and he's been charged with, I believe, sexual assault. That's my recall.
Yes,
I
that's
don't
right.
have the exact
Right.
terminology in front of me, so if I've made a mistake,
Yep.
I apologize on that. But the Special Prosecutor's Office, Prosecution Service, said that they, right after Finley was elected leader, they disclosed this and said it was appropriate to release it at this time, which is just, I just want to talk about the Special Prosecutor process. Like, that was, okay, February 9th, that's 3.5 months before they disclosed anything. It seems like they took action to disclose it. This is the way it looks to me, that Finley might have invited Keeley back into caucus. And then if this had come out after that, he probably would have had to leave caucus again. So I think they're thinking like, oh, we should make sure we don't get in the middle of this. And that was probably a wise decision. But it's very kind of, I mean, maybe it's a good thing that special prosecutor has that kind of discretion to choose when to disclose things or not, but there certainly doesn't seem to be a firm guideline on it.
Well, I think special prosecutors have been a world of pain for a lot of reasons. I mean, the role is required. I don't dismiss that, and I'm not second-guessing any decisions this one has made, but they can take a long, long time to come to a conclusion.
Yeah.
And that puts a pall over the entire administration for a long time as well. I mean, I think there were cases when you were with Christy Clark where you encountered that. Certainly, you take a look at the case of Ginny Sims when she was a cabinet minister in the Horgan government. The opposition received documentation which they thought was bad. They went to the RCMP and said, we want this investigated. And the RCMP said, okay, we will investigate it, which is, you don't always hear that. Like, nobody knew that there was a Jordan Keeley investigation going on until the prosecutor said, well, we decided to tell you now, and we picked the timing because of reasons that we know that we're not really being completely transparent about. All of this means the special prosecutor is supposed to take the politics out of the system, is actually injecting some politics into the system. In Sims' case, they came to a head pretty quickly. The RCMP said, it was the RCMP in that case, said, we don't see any reason to pursue this, and we've dropped the investigation, and that was that. But it did mean she was forced out of cabinet, and this is the other question mark, is that, how far do you have to go with this? If someone's charged, and there's two now charged who were elected with the Rustad Conservative team who are out of caucus because they're under investigation. The other one is Hanwha, I think it is. I don't know that you can force them to resign their seats. The NDP's now proposed that that's the case, that they should resign completely. It's an interesting partisan point, but I don't think it meets the test of innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, and then you've got the case of David Eby firing Adam Walker from caucus and refusing him an NDP nomination next time, which we will probably never know why that happened. And there was no process whatsoever. So, from a legal point of view, right?
That's right.
So, I mean, I think there was, in the NDP's reaction to this, I felt they were a little too bloodthirsty jumping on this issue and trying to make it a Carrie Lynn Finley issue when she's just become the leader. And I think there was an insinuation that when did she know, what did she know, and when did she know it? It's like, within days she'd been leader, and then this drops on her lap. I mean, I didn't think that was
a
necessarily
related question,
fair.
although there's certainly no allegation of wrongdoing in a criminal sense with Tara Alexander. There's a lot of accusations against her for political wrongdoing, for making unacceptable statements in the House and unacceptable associations. She's a supporter of Carrie Lynn Finley.
You're talking about Tara Armstrong.
Tara Armstrong's right.
I'm talking about Keeley.
I know you are, but I mean, there's the second issue where there's a debate is, Keeley's not going anywhere, in my opinion. He's not going to resign. He's not in caucus, and the Conservative Party's made it clear he's not coming into caucus until the whole thing's cleared up, if then. But Tara Alexander's a different case because she's said things that are politically extremely challenging.
Yeah. Tara Armstrong, yeah, and she she endorsed Finley, and it's unresolved at this point whether she's coming back to caucus or not. we'll see. I imagine if she doesn't come back to caucus, that could be a tricky issue. She does have her group of supporters can be quite noisy. And she did deliver her riding for Carrie Lynn Finley too. So we'll see what happens there. There seems to be a broad consensus that, and I think they've ruled themselves out going back to caucus. That's Eleanor Sturcone and Amelia Volpe, and
Right.
I don't think they want to go back. I don't think Finley wants them, so they'll just go their separate ways.
Even that's a good starting point for the NDP, because it means that the right-hand side of the room is more fractured than it would be in most circumstances. And to go back to Gordon Campbell's point about how he went out and tried to recruit the best possible candidates, there's going to be problems for the Conservatives in some of these ridings where they will face an independent Conservative and maybe find it harder to find someone of their own who could defeat the NDP, because these are going to be some close races.
Okay, well, moving on. The kickoff of the first game for FIFA is Saturday, June 13th. Australia plays. I can't remember who they play. 5 of the 7 games don't include Canada, so it's not clear to me how exciting these games are going to be for people around here, unless we see a big influx of fans come in to support their country's team, which would maybe be noticeable. But what do you want to put down a marker on this FIFA experience that we can say, here's how we measure success, that this was worth it?
Well,
what do you think that is?
The thing with this is that it's not really a numbers game. We study all the numbers now. It's really because people love soccer and they have a passion for the game, and this is the very top rank of the world soccer world, so I have to take that into account. Certainly that's why the government first turned it down, because it's expensive, and then decided to do it. Ann Kang, the minister responsible, put out a financial report assessing that they'd reduced the cost of some of the expenditures. It's still going to cost money, but the net cost of the province will be lower because they've been able to reduce some of the expenditures, and they see the revenue improving. The problem here is that the revenue attributable is partly these intangibles you get with all these economic studies, but the province was going to levy a hotel rate, a room tax basically, and apply it to the costs of FIFA. So the theory was, we're going to have all these people come in, they're going to fill the hotel rooms, we'll get some money out of them, and we'll use that to pay for some of our costs. But it's not clear that those hotel rooms are getting filled. In fact, the early reports are that the take-up is lower than it was last year. And economists will tell you, well, if somebody's coming in to take the room, somebody would have taken the room anyway, so you're no really further ahead. Anyway, I'll leave that for economists to work out. Maybe would we have another one on?
I'm not really sure what the. I think probably I might recall the Olympics in 2010, which was a very different event, but it seemed like there was a lot of concerns about a lot of kind of debate before it actually happened. But once it happened, it kind of took off like a rocket with the public, and people were like, "Wow, this is great." Now this is a different setup, different accent.
What do you think? I don't feel the same buzz. I don't feel it.
I don't feel it at this point, but maybe we'll all get swept into it. When Canada plays on June 18th and June 24th, I think that will be very exciting, especially if they win. But then that's it. There'll be a few more games not involving Canada, but Canada's moving on to another city for subsequent games, and there won't be any more of that. So anyways, I hope it works out, but as a worthwhile experience, but there's a lot of security guards getting a paycheck. So
and this is another interesting piece about the Olympics, and sometime it'd be interesting to have Gordon Campbell on just to talk about the Olympics. But there was tens of thousands of British Columbians who volunteered to provide volunteer services during the Olympics. Of course, they had paid security too, but they were trained in all kinds of crowd management tools and that kind of stuff, all of which contribute to the feeling of excitement and the torch relay and that kind of thing. It was a very different amateur, and although it's not really amateur sport, there was that feeling that, my kid's going to be able to go and watch curling or whatever your thing is. Very, very different community experience than this. FIFA's doesn't have, difficult as the Olympic Committee is, it's not FIFA.
Well, if you made me choose between the Olympics and FIFA, I would choose Expo. I'm an Expo guy. Bring me another Expo. That's what I say. That was truly participatory opportunity for British Columbians to get involved in that.
Well, and a complete surprise. Like nobody had any idea what it was. And it turned out to be terrific. So
It was fantastic, yeah. For those of us born before 1986. Okay, so last point. SFU Medical School, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for SFU. It's a big deal for Surrey because it's going to be in downtown Surrey. A real kind of foundation building block, I think, for the evolving downtown, which is still finding its way, taking shape. But the founders of Nature's Path stepped in with $40 million. So I just want to say hip hip hooray to the oligarchs.
well, yeah, I don't know if they're
Well, you got 40 million lying around. Doesn't that qualify you to be an oligarch?
not anymore. No, you have to go a lot further than that. Yeah, I think
You have to
so.
go more than that? Okay.
I think so. I mean, Jimmy Pattison's an oligarch. He's given $40 million twice.
Just because
now.
it's Nature's Path doesn't mean they're not oligarchs, Jeff.
It's Aaron and Ratana Stevens, and they have very successful business in food processing, a whole bunch of things, as you say. But yeah, it was great news, and there's been a number of health facilities open up. They were at Royal Columbia. No, sorry, the Royal Columbia was a separate announcement. That has a Pattison Pavilion added as well.
Pattison Tower. Yeah,
And
that just opened, I
Tower,
think.
yeah. And Cowichan is 90% complete. And St. Paul's Hospital is getting ready to start moving some of the services over. Not immediately. I think it's still about a year from welcoming a patient, but some big health facilities coming online. And thanks to some of the philanthropists, as you say, who are helping along the way.
Yeah, and on the St. Paul's one, which is obviously a massive deal for complex care in British Columbia, it was actually the advocacy of some people involved with Providence at some of the major funders, guys some of them have passed away now, who were in their late 70s or 80s at the time, this goes back over 10 years ago, who said, you know what, we raise a lot of money for St. Paul's, and we think the government's plan, which was a BC Liberal government at the time, to just put more stuff onto the Burrard Street site, they said it was a bad idea. You should move it to the site over in False Creek Flats and repurpose the land in Burrard Street for, sell it and reinvest it in the hospital, and which they did. And ultimately, government changed its mind. And I think that was a good example of advocacy by people who care about the hospital, and secondly, the government listened, and I think it was win-win all around. So I'm excited for that hospital to open for sure. Okay, we've worked hard. Should we head to the minibar?
Okay.
What do you got?
Well, at the risk of repeating ourselves, I was going to raise a glass to Aaron and to Stevens for their contributions to that medical school. And the medical school, not without controversy in the background, as you may be aware. I mean, Surrey is a political entity all onto its own, and it always has something that it really, really, really needs to have, including Memorial Hospital expansion. But a few years ago, it became an absolute consensus view of the voters of Surrey. They had to have a medical school.
Yeah.
And arguably, I guess...
Well played, Jeff. Well played.
Well, they got it eventually.
Yes.
And
they got into the platform first.
It got into the platform, and it wasn't something that made that, from a straight sort of management perspective, made sense, because the UBC Medical School had already created a medical training facility up north at UNBC.
Yeah.
But a second school is there now and is coming, and the Stevens have made that a reality. So very interesting to see how that plays out. It'll have certain. I think it'll steer in some directions differently from UBC, but we'll see.
Very good. I've got a couple. I'm going to raise a glass to someone most listeners probably never heard of before. Mark Rushton. Some of the BC Liberal world will know. Mark passed away recently. He was former editor in Abbotsford, I think the Abbotsford News and other papers. He was a real character, real kind of cowboy type figure who found his way into the Mike DeYoung campaign in 1994 as DeYoung's communication advisor. And back then we're talking pre-internet, pre-paid staff. This was just volunteers trying to win campaigns. And that's where I got to know Mark. And he was a character in the First Order. He was a big part of Mike DeYoung's political operation for many years. Great storyteller, great maverick-type personality. I will miss him. And my condolences to Mark's family and his friends. The other person I want to raise a glass to, who's very much among us, is Jim Shepard, former CEO of Canfor, former $1-a-year man in Christy Clark's office. He actually got a raise to $2 a year during his stint, which may explain the wage inflation that subsequently took root under the NDP governments.
Yeah.
But Jim just published a book called Resilience Required, which is mainly a full spectrum of his career from a homeless kid who lived in rooming houses as a high school student to all of his travels to ultimately to the corporate boardroom, and very much not a cookie cutter corporate executive, very much independent, again, maverick in a way. Strong personality who does a lot to raise money for cancer now. So, Jim, raise a glass to you. Congratulations on your book. Okay. Thanks to the Honorable Gordon Campbell for visiting Hotel Pacifico this week, and to our sponsors for allowing us to bring this episode to you for free. See you next week. BC, you can never leave.